My name is Joyce Kirk and I'm the Provost and Deputy Vice-Chancellor of the University of New England. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet this evening and to pay my respects to elders past and present. I would like to acknowledge the Dungutta, Gamilaroi and Gambungi people who share the caring of this land. I would like to welcome you all here this evening, and especially the members of the Archibald family. We have here with us this evening Auntie Grace Gordon, who is the daughter of Frank and Sarah Archibald, and of course it's Frank Archibald after whom the lecture is named this evening. We have two granddaughters of Frank and Sarah Archibald. We have Barbara Ahoy and Alice Mackenzie. We also have a number of great-grandchildren, and if the great-grandchildren wouldn't mind just raising their hands, just so we can see the spread of the family, including our guest speaker, of course. Thank you. And we also have a number of great-great-grandchildren. So if the great-great-grandchildren wouldn't mind raising their hands too. The young ones, they are the young ones. Thank you very much. So not only are we going to hear the Frank Archibald lecture this evening, but we're going to do so in the company of many members of the Archibald family, which is a really nice, elegant, circular shape to our evening's proceedings. I would like to introduce Larissa Ahoy, who is a great-great-granddaughter of Frank and Sarah Archibald, and she's going to deliver the welcome to country. Larissa.
Hello, my name is Larissa Ahoy. It is an honour for me to present the welcome to country tonight on behalf of the Archibald family. I am a great-great-granddaughter of Frank and Sarah Archibald. I would like to begin by acknowledging Auntie Grace Gordon, the only surviving sibling of Frank and Sarah Archibald, but sadly she can't make it here tonight. I think she's just a little bit sick. My nan, Barbara Ahoy, and my auntie Alice Mackenzie, I'd like to acknowledge you guys, yes as well. I also like to acknowledge members of the Archibald family who are present here tonight. And again, sorry, I would also like to acknowledge MC Professor Joyce Kirk. I would like to acknowledge the Anouan people whose land where this lecture takes place. The Anouan people share the caring of this country with the Gumbang, Dungatti and the Kamilaroi people. I pay respect to the elders of those nations and I extend that respect to each of you here tonight. And as a descendant of the Anouan people, I welcome you.
I would like to thank you all for your attendance here this evening. As you know, this lecture was established by the University of New England to honour Frank Archibald, a revered member of the Armidale community. That will be no surprise to you. And he was highly regarded for his knowledge and interest in all issues affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Our guest speaker today, as you know, is Dr. Raymond Kelly, who is a research academic with the Pure Eye Global Indigenous and Diaspora Research Studies Centre at the University of Newcastle, just down the road. We welcome him here to his home country, which is really very important for us, and it's a real privilege to have a speaker from his home country here with us this evening. Dr. Kelly is a man of the Dungatti and Untitled people, born and bred in Armidale, and you can't get much better than that. He is also the great-grandson of Frank and Sarah Archibald. He's been a resident of Newcastle only since 1981, so I guess we can forgive him for that. And he has worked extensively with the Aboriginal people. Dr. Kelly's abiding interest lies in language and how it defines culture and its native speakers, and that passion has guided his life both professionally and academically. He is very active in professional associations, and some of the associations with which he has been working include the Centre for Aboriginal Language Coordination and Development, where he was chairperson from 2012 to 2014. He sits on the New South Wales Heritage Council, of which he's been a member since 2013, and he sits on the New South Wales Aboriginal Language Advisory Group. Dr. Kelly took his PhD from the University of Newcastle in 2015, and today he's going to talk to us about his 30-year inquiry into Aboriginal languages and how those languages inform our understanding of millennia of Aboriginal occupation of this land. Welcome, Dr. Kelly, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Ginigang Mujawan, Winyinda, Yamagaro. I can't think of any other way to say hello to you this evening in a language. But I think it's important to recognise that I pay respects to my welcome to country to start with. Welcome home, welcome to. I accept and embrace that with all sincerity. I thank you very much for that welcome. I don't know that I've been welcomed any more warmly anywhere. So thank you very much. Professor Kirk, through. Thank you for taking care of me this evening. I'm trying to stay on track. I want to acknowledge all the elders in the room. And in doing so, I look to the elders, and I look to the elders who are emerging elders, because that's our landscape today. When I was a child, all of the Archibald clan were here, and we would consider those people certainly the elders. Mum, Annie Mac, Annie Barbara, you are our elders now. I acknowledge Tom Briggs. Annie Dot, is she still there? Annie Dot, up the back? Okay. So I acknowledge elders because it's important for us to do that. I want to thank the university for providing the opportunity to not only communicate about my work and some of the issues that I've been involved in recent times, but to give me the honour to work and to communicate and to celebrate the work of this wonderful man. Frank Archibald, if you don't mind, I'll move in and out of grandfather and Frank as we do, because that's a black fella's way. 14 years when he passed away, and I remember fondly he and Nanny Sarah travelling up from the old White House down the road, and they'd come up in the morning and then they'd go back and then they'd come up again in the afternoon. And I remember this because it was always there. They were always there. I remember a time when Nan wasn't there, but I think I was a child and didn't quite understand why she wasn't there. Perhaps children at times don't always see the world around them. But I recall grandfather Archibald, then moving in with Annie Mac in the top half of the community, and so I often saw him in that space. The one thing I recall about that old man was that he walked proud. He always wore his hat, and every morning I would come out and I often recall him walking over to the back of our little community, and he'd be picking up handfuls of wood to start a fire. I suppose a contribution to the day ahead. I want to thank my former supervisor, Jean Harkins, who's in the audience this evening, who's a former member of the UN staff. And the reason I do that is when I began when I enrolled in the PhD program, I had a sense of what I thought was the world. You know, as young people do, you know, yes, I know everything. I could argue this or I could argue that. But when it comes to pulling apart your work, the intricate details of what it is that you're trying to investigate and then to articulate, sometimes you need somebody who's walked the pathway before you. And so I acknowledge Jean, who's here with us this evening, and Pam, thank you very much also for making the trip up. Of course, they're coming home to see Archibald as well. Before I let the presentation unroll is fine. I want to let people know that there are going to be some sound files and some of people who are no longer with us, not merely just grandfather Archibald, but older pictures as well. And the reason I do this is because predominantly that's the space in which I've worked for the last 15 years. I work with sound recordings. There have been days when I've spent whole days listening intently to what is being articulated in those sound files. That became the body of my work later on, but it's a long drawn out thing, and I probably look forward to coming home and running some workshops, but it's an exciting thing. But I need to make that point because it is without their insights, it is without their knowledge, without their worldview, my PhD wouldn't have had the grounding, wouldn't have had the sense of distance, wouldn't have the sense of connection between people without that detail. So I've called the piece tonight Memories, Milestones and Monuments. And in some ways I hope that I can, through the storytelling and through the imagery, take us through each of those elements. The idea of monuments was an interesting one to start with because recent times there's been vandalism of major monuments in Sydney and elsewhere. But tragically, I've seen just yesterday on the news about the destruction of places, resting places. What is going on with the world? So when somebody asks me, what do you think about the idea of changing monuments? I just think we need more monuments. I think we need more places to sit down and take time to reflect on those that have led the way before us. And so we're going to start with the first piece. So we'll move through the first image. So in 1992, the University of Newcastle bestowed upon my grandfather, Len de Silva, who is the second husband of my grandmother, Ethel de Silva, an honorary doctorate. And on this occasion, grandfather was ill and couldn't make the trip. Nan, in all that great stride that she can take, came down there to Newcastle, was on that stage, and I've got to tell you, it was the most impressive thing that I've ever witnessed in my life. So I'm going to give you a small snippet of that story. But before I do, I want you to recognise that sometime later I also got a PhD, an honorary doctorate from this university. and then went on to complete a body of work for myself. It's not that I didn't honour the first degree, because I do. But I wanted to do it because I'd never had the opportunity. I got out of school too early. I ran away. I couldn't see the reason why I would be there. But anyway, let's get to this story. This is my grandfather, and he became known as our grandfather. My grandfather is actually Alan Mackenzie, and I'm going to acknowledge him here. But if we can play this sound file, this is a conversation that Len De Silva is having with Raymond Lewis Kelly, my father, and Howard Creamer, two well-known identities back in the 70s, working for the newly established National Parks and Wildlife Service. I call them the odd couple. But their story and their legacy is for another time. So if we can listen to the sound file, please.
Conversations with Len De Silva, Armidale, August 1973.
See, you're getting a bit like Bill Odnott now. He wouldn't pay me.
Bill Odnott's paid you what, $5
Yeah.
over how many
Yeah.
weeks?
Oh,
They
about
pay you
three,
$10
no,
a
3
day?
years, a bit more.
No,
Now,
I think the same thing we can do the same thing again, is when you come with us and we take the lingo and things like that, we'll
Yeah.
still pay the $10 a day.
yeah. When you
If
take,
that's all right with you.
oh, that's okay with me. I'm not growling about it. I'm satisfied with that because I get a pension for you, Bobo. You know what I mean? I'm not
Well,
worried.
we're not going to say nothing about the pension.
No, that's
Anyhow,
all
you're
right.
still allowed to
I'm only 20.
$20 a day. Well,
No. A week.
Week.
Yeah, only a week, yeah.
Yeah, well, anyhow,
Only up to 20, eh? Well, if you come out with us, say 3 times a week, you'll be up to 30 for a start. No,
Yeah, I thought, you know what I thought you were going to say? I'll only give you 20. I thought you were going to try and catch me then. I was getting ready to say, no, you won't.
Something tells me
I was getting my head ready for you then. No, I said, you know what I'm going to get. See? I said, you know what I ain't getting about? He said, Wado. I said, Ray. Beware. I think he said, beware.
anyway.
I said, you know Ganyari. I said, you must have forgot. He said, yes. He wasn't sure whether to give him or not.
So the reason I wanted to put that up was to recognise that up until that period of time, a lot of the informants, language speakers, storytellers, holders of knowledge, were sometimes given some recompense for their knowledge, but more often than not, their material was taken and wasn't properly recompensed. You know, they weren't given due credit, and so on and so on. And so Howard Creamer, Ray Kelly, in this period of time, brand new, firebrand, a new pathway. This is how it's going to be. And certainly, grandfather is the right man for the job too. No, you won't be getting me. I'll be getting you. So, if we can move on with the next piece. Next image. So, this is the statement that Raymond Lewis Kelly writes in a paper in 1975 to the Australian Archaeological Association. From the Kipara to a cultural bind. It was an analysis of the Aboriginal situation. And we were at that stage living on the mission at Armidale. This is only just a very small snippet of this piece. We may make it available for the website where you can get it. You can dream it from the Kipara to a cultural bind, put that in www and it'll find you. He said in this paper, I endeavour to explain a very difficult situation that we, the mission Aborigines, have been put in since the establishment of the mission environments. My theory is that we mission Aborigines have been unconsciously rejecting the Western man's education for fear we would be proven failures in absorbing it. I believe we must try to feed in some of our own education into the school system. By doing this, we will gain pride in ourselves and our race, and we will gain a sense of knowing who we are and what we are hoped to achieve out of life. This result can only achieve when both white and black gain respect for each other. For us to gain respect for white people, we must be respected as human beings. Only then will we respond to the white people's offering. So if we can go back in time to the 70s, I've got to tell you that I read this paper as a 13, 14-year-old and I thought, that's a good thing, powerful. But we also have to recognise that the alliances that we enjoy today were not there. There was clearly a boundary between that mission community and this town. Whether it was real, whether it was in our heads, wherever it came from, we knew it to be true. And so the change to that comes from people working hard. And so there are lots of people who have been instrumental in breaking down those invisible barriers and working towards a common goal. On the right-hand side is an image that goes along with the paper, and there are actually two images, but we just thought we'd take the one. And it talks about researchers, not just those in the university, but researchers anywhere, who sometimes take the information from the Aboriginal communities, wherever they may be, and do not have any way of giving that information back. Usually it is by that grapevine. I thought I heard somebody say that he did this, or I heard somebody say that he did that, or I heard somebody say. What Raymond Kelly was arguing for in that time, in 1974-75, was a feedback system that was direct, and that was honest, and that was timely. So let's move on. So here's our little community, here's our little community in the 60s, and I chose this image here on the left because this is the earliest time of the mission. Nan Hazel there. Anybody think that might be Robbo, maybe? Yes. It is, wonderful. Cousin Robbo there. But everybody on the right are all the children in that period of time. And the reason I chose this was about identifying kinship and relationship. So just because we're all children, but there's a thing about us. There are uncles and aunties in that group, and we know that based on kinship. So Auntie Ella, Uncle Malcolm, and yet we don't call them that today, but in truth, based on our relationship in our family structure, they are uncles and aunties. Now, in that time, those elders in our community never let us forget it. You tell Uncle Billy Pat. So it was about reminding us not just where we belonged, but how we fitted into our relationship with others. Can we go on? Prior to that, Anik, Mum, and Stephen, I think Stephen Witters is in the audience, Tommy Briggs. You'd remember this, the destruction of this old reserve, the old mission, the old times. Silver City, or before, and so it became a new time. We need to recognise though that at that period of time, quite a number of deaths occurred in that little place. And so that's all I'll say on that one. I'll move on. Shall we go on? The new keys to the house, the Armidale Association, Assimilation Association, people working for the university are actively taking their time to work with members of our Aboriginal community. People are really making a noise about those conditions. And so they're not just talking about it, they're out there providing some services, some meals, some support. There's so much we need to write about in terms of drawing out this, and I've got 45 minutes and I'm babbling on, so I'm going to keep moving on. Here is my methodology. And this methodology came from listening and sitting down and listening to those tapes. It reminded me of my grandmother, It reminded me of the time when we would come out of our little house, because of only one stove in it at that time, wrapped in blankets, making over to Nan's place and grandfather's place where we had a windbreak made, had a fire going. We'd all sit down there and all us kids, and Nan would move us around, move out Rayboi, let somebody else in. And we sat there as a family. And off to the side there, grandfather De Silva, grandfather Archibald, going for it in the lingo. Now we could never quite make out what they were saying, but there are things and sounds inside those periods of time that I could hear even now. And so they became a means of my investigation later on. But it's family and community knowledges. When we look to the idea of culture and heritage, you only have to go into family and community. We know sometimes, though, that we keep that information to ourselves, or we're not sharing it. Now, I think the exciting thing going forward is that we might rebuild some of those sit-down spaces. Listening to old people has always been and always was a thing that I love to do. Thinking back now to grandfather being communicated in that time, I'm only a year or two younger than he was at that time, so time moves on. The art of storytelling, remembering an event and a place and a time, is the art of storytelling. And our people are gifted storytellers. The traditional education of leading younger people, older people leading younger people. We were kids, we would go out rabbiting, and you'd learn things on the way. But the issue of multilingualism in Indigenous communities is enormous. Look at the language conversations that the language spaces. Anawan, Gumbangi, Dangati, Kamilaroi, Banjalang, all of these languages are drifting in and out of our everyday. English is drifting in and out of our spaces. We are communicating in Aboriginal English. And I'm going to talk to you about that if I get a little bit of time, about what is Aboriginal English. The academic knowledges, historical sources and audio recordings are all important. Okay. Again, though, it comes back to family. It comes back to family. Senior couples, and I think that's Grandfather Joe Woods also in that image. There's a story, and I want to just digress for 2 seconds. Went today to backtrack. A little group out here. If you get the time, please go out and see them. Young kids at risk, being looked after, being shown some mentorship. They're working with supporters, working with dogs. And so I wanted to put that out because Grandfather Joe Woods, there were many, many stories about Grandfather Joe Woods and his dogs, healing dogs. This is Frank Archibald, and so when we really begin to start to tease out Frank Archibald's story, you can take them from the sound files. But when he was telling us stuff in that period of time, we just thought they were little stories. A little song about a train, and I'm heading towards that. If you can see here, though, this is an image of Robert or Malawangi. This image was in the New Dawn magazine. Here is a blanket record, and I've taken a small extract from here. The man on the top is actually, the first identity is Frank Archibald himself. 1895, Frank Archibald is described as, he gets one blanket, he's described as a half-caste, and he's a male. At the bottom, the three names at the bottom are King Robert. He gets 2 blankets, he's a full-blood, he's a male. Emily, he gets two blankets, she's a female, and Emily as well. So this is Frank's mother and his grandmother, and she gets a single blanket. So when we hear stories, when we were kids, they were far-fetched. Who could imagine such things? And yet, people just telling stories, holding on to memory. Can we move on? So here are some images. This one is taken somewhere, and is there a lady at Chapman that works with? Hey, nice to meet you. You too. I love your work. She provides us with this detail. So when we look towards the imagery and we bring it up, you could see this chin whisker of Robert's. And so I'm pretty confident that's Robert. Over here, Emily. This is older Emily, not younger Emily. And there's a comparison. I'm pretty comfortable that they're likely to be the same people. So move on, please. So, getting to it. A little song about a train that we kids learnt, and we just thought it was a little beautiful little ditty. So move on. But in 1883, the train did come to Armidale, and so if we can move on to the next one. Here's another image, and Frank and Malawangi and Emily, I do believe, are on the top of that. But this is 10 years later. We know that because the construction of the Imperial Hotel is there. So what event was this? The arrival of Lord Jersey. We know that what happened in that period of time, the foundation stone for the the Armidale School happens. There are lots of things happening in this space at that time. We had a conversation today. Do you think it's structured? Do you think it's set? Well, I think clearly Armidale wanted to impress the governor of the day, and he rolled out the best assets. Okay, so this is my interpretation of the song. This is my breakdown of it, and I do this based on countless hours of listening to it. I'm not sure that I'm going to have the time to. I'll sing it. So, oh bell 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 dijalel mi armenga. Na wangalagi wangalaga mengo ngariting pisan mi armenga mengo. I had a conversation on the radio this morning. I think I've got a touch of asthma. So we move on. Okay, recent. The passing of legislation by the New South Wales government to protect and care for Aboriginal languages in New South Wales has been a monumental thing. The difficulty is that we still are unsure about what it is that's being offered. For me, I'm not too worried by what's being offered. The fact that a government in this country has said, yes, we're going to legislate and protect Aboriginal languages is an important thing. The work that needs to happen in Aboriginal communities. We need to sit down and have conversations about those things that we consider to be different. Work out what our relationships are. Build new pathways forward. Because at the end of the day, it's our children who are waiting on that leadership. It is our children, and I use this analogy of giving them a blue sky. We need to give them an opportunity to see or vision a future with them in it. And having been to Backtrack today, I'm absolutely more convinced today that that's what we have to do. Can we move on? There's Raymond Kelly now on the left with Uncle John Quinlan, Uncle Victor Shepherd, and Mr. Les Smith, I think. Okay. 3 Gumbangi, 2 Dangati, talking about culture and language in that space at that time. And over on the right-hand side is yet again senior men to those, Mr. Gilbert Duckett, Mr. Fred Dunn, Richard Kelly, Dix Quinlan, and Lachlan Vale. So I've got a sound file here real quickly for this one. And it's only a small song recorded in Armidale in the about 1965.
God again, 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 I'm right wing, I'm here going, I get along, I'm right wing, here go, get along, I'm right wing, here go, get along.
It's the one tape that I have that I didn't get remastered. So I have all those tapes remastered. So if we just move to the next space, this is the space in which I work. This line of detail here is sound files. I can listen to any of that space in it at any time. I can recall in an instant. I can sit and I can listen. I can go back time and time again until I'm comfortable that I've actually recorded it all. Now I work from the works of some fine linguists in the lead up to this, and please don't let me think that I'm casting stones at all, because I can tell you that I've made adjustments to the way in which I thought I was working in the first period and some of the stuff I was hearing earlier on as well. But this is a way forward, and so to me it's about giving other young people, or younger people than I now, this skill to work with some of these sound files and to work with some of this material to extract and to extrapolate the detail that's in it. So the sounds, files, oh sorry, hey look, I can muck around with this too. Sound files, and look, there are probably 35, 40 hours in what they're calling a Dungati. There's probably 130, 40 odd in Gumbangi. There are way many more in the west of New South Wales. There are some elements of Kamilaroi. And I've had just a tease of a listen into that, and I've got to tell you, I'm excited by what that possibility is. So if we can move on. Part of the leadership for Aboriginal people has always been the passing of the rules. The attainment of recognition, not just by men, but also by women. Much of my work has identified and we've the senior women in their roles in our leadership. In particular, in 1925, Bola Callaghan was absolutely critical to this movement. And so what we have from the records of a very fine researcher, Barry Morris, is the story of the Quinlan family, who talk about Uncle John talking about that he was there and the men come and took him away, and then his Sadie Miranda and others, his sisters, who were talking about they said things like, and the women, they just threw their little sticks in their own way as a part of this separation. And Uncle John then came back and said, well, I thought my mother was making sure I never come back. But it's this leadership that I think has always been a part of our tradition. We may have now just turned that into the football. We may be now at the knockout. We may do that and say, well, we've got to blood these young fellas. And it happens. It happens. So, an important occasion, but really it's just about leadership. It's about families taking responsibility, saying, no, we need the good behaviour. We need to set rules. So I'm going to move on, and this will be my final piece. And it's a plea to people who may be involved or would like to be involved in the recognition of the event that was held in 1925 at Bellbrook. People came from as far away as the Clarence River. They travelled together. And so on the left-hand side is an image or a design by Raymond Kelly. I think this is about 1973 or 74. And on the right, it is a design by Uncle Victor Shepherd in 1975. Now, I was one of those young men who were taken to sites around the local area in 74 and 75. And I can tell you that I today yearn for that leadership, but I also recognise the value of those old people and what we missed. Uncle Victor died not too long after. And I'll tell you that he was talking to us not about magic and mystique. He was telling us that our people had been in resistance since the 1960s. This is one of the conversations that he was having with us as children. He said that in 1960, at Serpentine, a site out here in the Ebor area, people came from as far away as the Hunter Valley. Kamilaroi came, Anawan came, Gumbangi came, Clarence River came, and they were having a conversation. And they were having a conversation about resistance, about survival, and about leadership. I'm going to leave it on that piece and hope that at some point we all get to build our monuments.
Thank you very much, Ray, for sharing us your thoughts on milestones, monuments and memories, and for reinforcing the power of storytelling. Ray has made himself available for a bit of extra time for some questions from the audience before we break to speak with each other and learn a bit more from each other. So I wonder if there are any questions that any of our colleagues in the audience might have about the work. Thank you.
Yes, what I found really fascinating there were the songs, because I mean they represent, both the culture, but particularly the railway song. It's created in language about an historical event, and this is the sort of thing that really needs to be preserved and promoted. So, what is being done about particularly making sure that the songs can be more widely known and distributed?
Ultimately, we need to communicate in our own communities about the value of those songs. I'm hopeful that people will go, yeah, look, this just needs to be done. What I think also needs to happen, though, is that we need to build momentum in terms of young people involved in linguistics. I really love the science of linguistics. I spend hours going around in circles, but sometimes you find a gem, and songs like those are gems. I'm going to be a little bit, I don't care. Jean Harkins and I have written a beautiful paper called Tiny Man. I've only got 10 copies, but it'll be out soon, and it is about a little song recorded at East Armidale, and I think it talks about our community, our culture in a good way. But if we're really going to do well in this space, we have to learn and share with each other to understand those bits and pieces. So when the old fella tells us things like he was puffing and this thing was puffing, and then he goes, it's like this. Gupijan is. Now, exactly how that is and what that describes at this stage, I'm still working on it. I mean, I'm working on what does it describe, but it shows that there is a way of describing anything and everything. So that's the part pathway forward.
Thank you.
I've read recently that even in way back times, people met to do like an ancient extended where they took the mickey out of each other. They translated those basics, those skills into taking the mickey out of whitefella occupation. Are there any of those sorts of, you come across any of those sorts of examples where songs were turned into parody about occupation or about whitefella coming?
I don't know that I can actually draw to something that describes that, but I can tell you that from a record provided by Threlkel, who was a missionary in Newcastle in between 1825, I think, to about 1855, he recalled that the community at what he was calling Ebenezer at the time at Toronto was making themselves ready for the arrival of the songstress. They were painting themselves with and making themselves ready for the arrival of the songstress. Within 15 minutes, people had learned a new song or a new style, and there was this uproar happening. So I'm excited by that. Look, contemporarily, we do some of those. My son does one about buck jumping, quite funny, you know. But yeah, okay. So.
Dr. Kelly, you mentioned multilingualism, linguistics, and that to me is the way forward that we can teach young people, or bring a new language, if you like, so it's English and all the dialects come together. What sort of before they're lost, and or we don't speak Old English anymore. We've moved on, what I'm saying is cultures change, I guess, evolve over time. So how do you see that coming together, I guess?
Well, I can only hope that the future is one of one where everybody is equal, where there is equality, where there is a sharing of resources. Because we can't pretend that we just pick up from here and go on. When you look at the disparity between those who have and those who have not, the large landscapes that we drive past and the beautiful big homesteads with all of the land cleared, that was once our land. So how do we manage our way forward? Well, I don't think I think we can't be bitter, but we've got to be determined. We've got to build together, and we've got to find enterprises that bring results for us. So in terms of the language, I love the idea of sharing. I'm certainly having conversations with people all the time. Gumbangi and Dangati, and I mean we share these distant skin names that have who knows how far back. But we also, I'm one of those inquisitive, maybe a bit of a pot stirrer too at times. And I say to Gumbangi, you fellas say Ginnegay? And I say, does that mean happy to see you? And they say, no, it means hello. And I say, well, Dangati say, Dala Korigindar tis nurri. That means children are happy, girri. So I'm not trying to start a blue. I want to start a conversation, because that's where the opportunities are, in the conversation.
Follow up on that, you said near the start about Aboriginal English. Can you talk a bit about the language?
Okay, and I said that I would ask some people to help me with this Aboriginal English. If so, those in the room, if you wouldn't mind, Aboriginal people, how is it that we know that the word Gera is Gera when it's written as Gara? Do you know the river out on the eastern side? Do you know that it's Gara? It's written Gara, but how do you know it's Gera? Who knows? How many people in this room know it as Gera?
No, I'm silent before the
Okay? No, I don't have an answer for it. But we know that it's Gera. So it holds. It holds in community. All right? So language will hold. Ua. Uatua means ngai uatua, I did something, or ninda uatua, you done something. Ua is the same as ua. I'm going to tell Mum and you did that. It is the same thing. So language does hold. What about the concept of a? Now, Jean and I are having a conversation about a. If you're from Wiradjuri out at Narendra, their way of saying a is to nasalise it, just like a. But we know it's an a. You know, so you can find it in language. Now, whether it was introduced or whether it was a making of our own, whether it was of our own making, it's still here. It's still language. It's still a way of communicating. And to me, that's where this new opportunity will come. When we don't throw anything away simply because we think it's been introduced, or we think it's slang, or we think it's some alteration of something else, because it's just a way of describing something, you know. All words are valuable, even the swear words. And tragically, that's where we as Indigenous, Guri, sorry, I said to somebody the other day I wasn't going to use the word Indigenous anymore, and if I catch myself, I got to. So Guri mob. So we need to invest in that sort of reawakening and rediscovery of language. What is it? What does it say? What does it describe? So even our swear words, we need to go back into that place and have some real deep conversations. And the last one I'm going to leave you with is the word yo. Now yo just means yes, but it's a powerful word. Gumbangi will tell you that yo in their way is, that's a bit of sarcasm. I've got to tell you, when I was a kid, if we were singing out for somebody on a football field running, we were singing out, yo! So there is the power of words. And so for us, it's about sitting down, having conversations and sharing once again and getting this yarn happening.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I just say from my heart what a privilege it was, Dr. Kelly, to allow us a glimpse into your scholarship, which was, of course, at the same time a glimpse into your family and your community. I spent a lot of my time up on the hill in the university thinking about knowledge, about how we measure it and how we assess it and how the little individual students that we have demonstrate it. But what you're reminding us is that knowledge is far more than that. In your words, it's not just what we know, or it's not where we are, but it's where we belong, how we fit in, our relationship with others. This is what I'm taking away from what you shared with us. That knowledge rests most profoundly in families and in communities and in songs. I have written down the words that you left us that made the most powerful impression on me, that you ask our children, what are our relationships? And when we think about knowledge in that way, we show our child a picture of the future with them in it, and I think that there's a lot for us all to think about that you've shared with us today. So thank you very much on behalf of the University of New England, and I'd like us all to express our thanks to Dr.